Today on the Wrestling Roundtable, the Monday Night Wars and wrestling cliches for this show number 64. Oh my God, 64. Yes.
Just 64, guys.
64. 64.
The Wrestling Roundtable.
All rise. The Wrestling Court Part 2 is now in session. The Honorable Eric J. Santamaria presiding.
You may be seated. Welcome to the Wrestling Roundtable. I am the host, Eric Santamaria. Been a wrestling fan for 23 years. Been working in it for about 8, almost coming up. And sitting to my right, which is your left, is Rodney LeConte. He's been a wrestling fan also for 23 years. What you been up to, Rod?
Enjoying summer, trying to keep cool, still training, still grappling, and the videography is going great.
Awesome. Orlando O'Neill is to my right, your left also. Orlando O'Neill has been a fan of 21 years. And how you doing, Orlando?
I'm doing all right. Just trying to relax this summer, stay cool.
Every time I hear your nickname Ollie, I think of Laurel and Hardy. Ollie. To my left, which is your right, he's the former NWA Force One Tag Team Champion, Alex the American Psycho Payne. He's been wrestling for 6.5 years, but you've also been watching wrestling for 24. How have you been? How are things going on the indies?
I'm chopping up bodies. Keep
Really?
in the basement, yeah. It's awesome. Don't tell anybody.
That's okay. I like my women like I like my coffee, ground up and in the freezer. But we're going to move on now to the Monday Night Wars, as we talked about last week. But before I do, I wanted to make a very special mention to somebody, because this is our 64th show, as you heard at the opening. And what I wanted to do at this juncture, we've been doing this about 4 years, is thank somebody who really at this point we wouldn't have been able to do this show without. And her name is Suzanne LeGrand. She's been very instrumental in helping us get things together, and I wanted to thank her by mentioning to you that she is a freelance artist who does work for commission. If you want paintings, drawings, comic art, she does jewelry, go to SilentLilyStudios.com. So thank you, Suze, for getting the show done. Wrestling Roundtable would not be done without you, I don't think, and I want to thank everybody who listens to us, subscribes, shares, rates, comments, and as I said before, subscribes. That's a big thing. After fucking Google killed a lot of the YouTube accounts earlier this year, we lost a lot of views and a lot of subscribers, and we're not alone. It happened to everyone's accounts, so I just hate seeing that, because we're starting to rebuild now. People are realizing fucking YouTube deleted my account. I got to create a new one. So if you had that happen to your account, get right back with us, and thank you for watching all these years. So all these years reminds us of the Monday Night Wars. We've touched upon it here and there. We've done shows on the Attitude Era, we've done Best and Worst on a lot of different topics, and it's come up a lot of times. We've never done it directly on the Monday Night War itself, and that's what we're going to do here, which lasted starting September 4th, 1995 at the Mall of America, the first Nitro, the first shot of the war, because really they just got lucky at the time. Ted Turner hadn't been ousted from Control yet when Time Warner started merging with TBS about a year later. Imagine that, a year later, it might not have worked out, where Bischoff was like answering to Ted Turner, what do I need to overtake WWF? Give me a lot of money on Monday night. Here you go. Might not have happened a year later. Think about that. And of course, we all know AOL and Time Warner merged later on, and that was a big factor in WCW going under. People do not pay enough attention to, I don't think. But the Monday Night War came to a close after Nitro beat Raw 84 weeks in a row. Then a couple years later, Nitro and Raw, the gap was very high. Even though TBS and TNT still had the top-rated shows with WCW, now all of a sudden the gap between Raw and Nitro was huge at that point. Even though WCW was still number one on the Turner Broadcast Networks, it really didn't look like it was going to come around, and it didn't, because the last Nitro was on March 26, 2001. So that's our time frame, a few-year time frame, but a very fucking important time frame in pro wrestling. So when we come to the Monday Night Wars, I think you can clearly say, looking at the ratings now, and maybe it's not adjusted for the actual amount of viewers or whatever, but you look at the ratings and you're like, holy fucking shit. tons of people were watching wrestling. I've made the case many times on the show, wrestling itself was hot back then. Everyone watched everything, including ECW and Indies or whatever the fuck. But the top three, everybody watched that pretty much, or at least was aware of it. So it was a lot of flipping back and forth between TNT and USA Network, between Raw and Nitro. That's what we used to do. And thank Christ there was a Nitro replay so we wouldn't miss everything. But I would say, like I was inferring before, wrestling was a fad back then. And I think that really showed after March 26, 2001, how a lot of people just tuned off to wrestling. But in that time frame, when we were in high school and all of a sudden everyone's wearing wrestling shirts or whatever, what made wrestling a fad back then? What made it so hot?
The competition. For wrestling, I think it was the Austin Tyson altercation that really drove wrestling to the next level. Got a lot of media attention. Just the way wrestlers cut promos, the way people wrestled, they were a lot more tuned into the times. People as kids are a fan of like the rock and wrestling era, the Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, and then everyone went away for like the Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels New Generation era. And then you have Austin who's cursing and drinking beer on TV, and people in high school think that's cool. And you have the NWO who are a lot of cool heels. The wrestling personalities have changed. The way people cut promos have changed. Matches changed. The way pay-per-views changed. Everything was much more intense. Everything had media attention. Celebrities were getting much more involved in wrestling. There's a lot more integration. Wrestlers are showing up on talk shows more. I think that's what really brought the attention to it. A lot more T-shirt driven too.
Well, it was really, like you were kind of saying, a generational thing. Because when we started watching when we were younger, it was the Hulk Hogan sort of stuff, like you said, with rock and wrestling. Well, now, and I think it really started with the NWO, this Monday Night War Wrestling getting hot stuff, because that made WCW right there.
Yeah.
But that was also perfectly timed for how we were feeling. Hormonally, what we felt growing up as teenagers or whatever, that was perfect for us sequentially. But why was it that as the 84 weeks in a row, as I mentioned, why did it go down like that? Why did WCW overtake the top wrestling company in America? Maybe not the world at that time, but definitely now. Why did they beat the top dog?
Mostly because Nitro was kind of refreshing. It was groundbreaking. They were having actually competitive matches with top-level talent. They were bringing in new talent. If you look at Raw for the first 2 or 3 years, it was majority squash matches. You might have one highlight match and then they're forwarding storylines. Nitro had, from pretty much top to bottom, stars fighting each other, furthering storylines.
Pay-per-view quality.
They were live.
Yeah.
They were live, and it was the first time where really someone went head-to-head with Raw. No one even went head-to-head with Primetime Wrestling. And now here we are with this company, WCW. You always knew them both, and they were never directly competitive.
Oh, they were.
But no, I'm not in
But
this
this
sense.
is more so than anything.
Not in this
They're
sense.
butting heads head to head.
Now it's a race, and now they're really competing for the Monday's views.
Well,
Right,
the
'cause-
defections also helped a lot of the fads too. You'd watch Luger show up at the end of Nitro. What would happen? What did you do the next day at school? You went and talked to your friends about it. It became, for people who are in school, for kids, it became the water cooler talk, or the talk you'd have before these classes start. Oh, did you watch what happened on Nitro? Guess who showed up? Oh, did you see that new wrestler? Oh, Rey Mysterio showed up. Oh, this Demo Malenko guy, he's pretty cool, or whoever it was, you paid attention to that. That was exciting at that period of time. That's what made wrestling cool. That was that fad. Like, there's always something exciting for the wrestling fan, and then if you talk about it enough and there's enough people talking about it, you kind
And
of
then
pull
next
it
Like
in.
you
More
feel like
and
if
more
you didn't
people
see it, you were really truly missing
you
out. It
pull
felt
in
like
people that
anything
didn't
could
watch
happen.
it. We're like, what happened last night? What are you talking about? And it kind of like word of mouth, it helped spread and turn wrestling on.
Well,
more
there was
popular.
history there. And what I meant about there was direct competition, we all know about WrestleMania, Clash of the Champions, signing people. There was a rivalry going back decades.
I'm not saying there wasn't a rivalry.
I'm sorry, I know that. But even like Black Saturday, Georgia Championship Wrestling, this had history. This was personal. It
Yeah.
meant something. And then like you're saying with the old style of Raw, the way it used to be. But Nitro's coming on now with like big fucking live shows every week. Like Eric Bischoff brilliantly said, if WWF does it one way, we're doing it the opposite and we're doing it better. And that to me, for that few year time period up until like 98 or so, between like 96, because at first there was Dungeon of Doom bullshit and other sort of stuff. They hit their stride in 1996. And for those couple years, there was never a better wrestling show. That was perfectly booked with international talent, wrestlers of all different sizes and gimmicks, names. If you like the AWA,
Continuity.
if there was Old school guys, NWA, Steiners, Flair, AWA you liked. They had Zbyszko and Bischoff. The old WWF guys, Savage, Hogan, etc. Sting, their own original guys, Goldberg, whatever, the cruiserweights, ECW wrestlers, Japanese, Mexican, like everything you wanted. It was a perfect variety show. But it didn't last very long, and unfortunately, depending on how you feel about WCW, and of course I feel unfortunate, Raw ended up beating Nitro and beat it bad for the last couple of years. But we're going to talk about that when we come back. More on the Monday Night Wars when we continue. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Joining the panel, switching it up a little bit to my right, which is your left. Introducing first, Will Effin Brooks. He's been a wrestling fan 23 years. He's in our chat room at WrestlingRoundtable.com every Monday night during Raw. Monday night, how coincidental. And also rejoining the panel is Rock and Roll Mike Sydal. He's the 2009 Pro Wrestling Illustrated Rookie of the Year. He's also been wrestling 5 years, but he's been watching 20, and you went through the entire Monday Night War watching every show like we all did. And sure did. I wanted to at least mention before we go on, because I did say we talked a lot about the Monday Night War in different sort of situations. If you want to get any show that we've ever done in audio form, go to iTunes, type in the Wrestling Roundtable, we're right there, and also Blog Talk Radio. Our entire archive is over there. We also got some stuff on Go Fight Live, GFL.tv, so there's lots of ways to listen and watch us, not just YouTube. Come on, join our Facebook group, follow us on Twitter. There's lots of other things you could do to follow the Wrestling Roundtable. But anyway, we were talking about the Monday Night War, and I left off with that question of Nitro's beating Raw for 84 weeks in a row. There was about a year after that, when they lost in 98, where the ratings were actually very close. The ratings for Nitro really didn't start slipping until about the spring, April of 99 or so. So the finger poke didn't fucking kill it, doofuses. In fact, Nitro on January 4th, 99, the next week did a 5.0, the same that show did. So much for killing it. The ratings didn't start sliding until much later. That's aside the point. Point is that eventually, after that rating started sliding, it went further and further down. Why did Nitro lose so much ground?
It was the poor booking, the silly storylines. One thing I think that might have been part of it, and we're seeing this again now with Raw, with 3 hours of stuff to fill, there was just so much stuff in there. There wasn't like one coherent story for people to follow. I think that was part of it. Also trying to fill 3 hours, the creative switch isn't on, full blast, throw out there whatever you can.
Well, we're seeing that now. Monday night show, 3 hours. Second blue-colored show a few days later. Didn't work out for WCW. Let's see how long it lasts when WWE tries it this time. But what do you think happened that made WCW lose so much momentum?
Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin. Not all by himself, but he was so much a believable character, very identifiable, and he was kicking like his boss's ass every week and doing everything he wanted to do, whatever he wanted to do. He was must-see TV.
Yes, but even when Austin was the top star in WWF, Goldberg won the title on the other show in July 98, and they blew Raw out of the water that night. So, like I was saying, the gap wasn't that far off.
But that is the case, but Austin pretty much gave people what they wanted at the point. When
don't people tune away in droves from something when you're not giving them something they want to see, what they want to watch?
Yes, but scale back 3 months before Austin became like the guy in 98, became the world champion. WCW had the opportunity to capitalize and give people what they wanted when Sting wrestled Hogan, and come back to Nitro the next night. If he had a clean win with the title, so on and so forth.
You know what though? After that, which was a big fuck up, they still did go on to have their most profitable year ever. Wrestling was
by
hot.
all means they did, but gradually over time, with that being like
you can't fuck people over so much.
The first knife in the back is you didn't give people what they wanted when they wanted to see it, and then gradually with all of the sensory overload that Mike was pretty much saying with this 3 hour block, and they're like, I'm throwing this at you, I'm gonna throw a cruiserweight this, we're gonna throw a gimmick match here, we're gonna throw that there. We'll do whatever it takes to try to get people to
But Raw was Crash TV. Wasn't it as much shit thrown against the wall on the other show?
They both did. They both are doing the best they could to just keep people going. Who's going to tune in the next day?
But it was just obvious that WF was doing it a little bit better. They had a little bit better time management. They just knew linear stuff. It just did a little bit better with it.
I disagree.
It
with
looked
that.
like Nitro was kind of a clusterfuck from where it should go.
We're going to move on to some of our best and worst moments of the Monday Night Wars. But before we do, I wanted to ask, because we've covered like when TNA tried going on the Monday nights, trying to recreate the Monday Night War, and that didn't last at all. And people always bring up competition. The competition was the thing that made WWF better and blah, blah, blah. Do you foresee, and we've asked this before on the show, but you have to hear, do you foresee any circumstance arising like this again? Or was it just in that time that was a unique time? We should have enjoyed it as fans as we did at the time, but don't expect it to ever happen again?
Hey man, anything can happen. You have to take a look at how the Monday Night Wars began, and it goes back to the history of those two companies and how they built their fan base. You would have to have an NWA, which WCW was before it was WCW, had almost a grassroots fan base coming from the territorial days. Another grassroots fan base distinct from WWF. When WWF bought out WCW, that whole WCW audience disappeared.
Yep.
So it was a distinct audience. So if another company, for instance, Impact Wrestling, now, if they can build their own large fan base, then we would see maybe some competition if they went head to head. But otherwise, if they're just sharing the same crowd, I don't foresee that happening.
I agree completely. There were so deep roots in the NWA and WCW that when they went to Nitro, it was like, okay, cool, we have a show we can watch. TNA, do I think they can do it? In the future, yes, but it's going to take a while. They do have to build their audience a little bit better. It'll take another year or two at least.
They do, on their side, always make the case that we've only been around 10 years, which may be an eternity in wrestling now, but still isn't a lot of time when you look at the bigger picture, I suppose. But we want to look at the bigger picture here. And when we get to best and worst, a lot of times I want to get the worst out of the way first. Let's get rid of the negativity so we can talk about some of the fun stuff, and I'm going to do that here. So what do you think were some of the worst moments of the Monday Night War?
The famous reset button.
April 10th, 2000?
Yeah. I hated it. It started the show. We're stripping everybody of the belts. These don't mean anything anymore. I can do what the hell I want with them.
I enjoyed that show.
I didn't.
That's the one where we found out Bischoff drove the Hummer.
No, wait, what?
No.
I thought we never found out who drove the Hummer.
Bischoff was revealed on April 10th, 2000.
No. You just rocked my world, man.
See, that's why a lot of people stopped watching in 2000. I have to inform these people.
I don't know if you knew it though, but Rikishi also ran over Austin.
I do recall.
Okay, that one.
But as you were saying, you hated the reset
I
button.
hated it. I think a lot of it had to do with Vince Russo's promo about it too.
Well, when you reset the company,
this-
you're
this-
essentially
this-
saying
this-
everything before this sucked.
Well, this is they're saying this
Yeah.
is junk. These are props. You can do what the hell I want with them. It's supposed to mean something. That world title, that main event spot, it's supposed to mean something. That U.S. title meant something.
Yeah.
And when you went and scrapped it all together and said, well, this means nothing. We're just gonna hold new tournaments for new champions. I thought it was a whole lot of bullshit.
Right before WrestleMania 14, this is early '98, The Undertaker and Kane were like showing off their powers to each other.
Oh, yes.
And like The Undertaker does some arm thing and the ring sets on fire, and then Kane does some hand gesture and lightning struck the camera guy and he ran around on fire for like a full
That was a
minute
different
before somebody
incident than
put
what
him
you were
down.
talking about, but I enjoyed Kane and Undertaker doing supernatural shit.
Two moments I really hate. I just mentioned one with when you realized it was Rikishi who ran over Stone Cold, which made no sense. You can tell they just came up with it earlier that afternoon. And when McMahon turned out to be the
It's me, Austin! No thought into that.
No,
But-
because there was no one else it could have been. It was obvious from the beginning.
I really hated This Is Your Life Rock. I know it did the
I
biggest
liked it.
rating, but it just embodied everything about Raw that I did not like at the time. At the time when, like, let's say the Owen tribute match on Nitro, a wrestling match, who gives a fuck? Here's the Stooges coming out, this Hogan sort of shit. I just hated Russo's whole focusing instead on the wrestling aspect of it, on the goofy segments. I never really thought it was that funny, so I think it gets way too much play. But on the Nitro side, in 1999, when Bischoff was really starting to lose control and lose focus of his product, there were a lot of concerts on Nitro. And the worst one, because at least we know what Kiss and Megadeth are, Chad Brock? Who the fuck is Chad Brock? This country singer no one cares about. And him taking up time on Monday Nitro, that was actually on August 9th, 1999. I just thought it really showed how out of touch Eric Bischoff had become at that point. So what do you think were some of the worst overall shows?
Any show that featured beaver cleavage segments, I thought that brought down the entire show.
Well, I could think of a specific show, and that was February 14th, 2000 Nitro. I think it went unopposed to the dog show and lost. It deserved to. Because this was when Kevin Sullivan was booking after Russo got sent home. And this whole show, unopposed, you've got no audience competing with you that night. You showed them everything wrong about WCW. This was right in the middle of Booker, not Booker T, because he lost the T. He's just Booker. The NWO had been reduced to Jeff Jarrett and the Harris twins. He was challenging Sid that night. But the part that really pissed me off the most was the top matches that Kevin Sullivan booked were Terry Funk and Lex Luger and Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. Really? When The Rock and Triple H and all the young guys on WWF are tearing it up, you're going to put that shit on from at least 10 years ago? It looked so outdated and bad. What do you think were some of the worst matches of the Monday Night War?
Tiger Ali Singh versus The Godfather.
You just have to say Tiger Ali Singh, and it's automatically shitty.
Or The Godfather.
At least he was funny.
That was a rough one.
I think of two, and that would be Rick Steiner and Conan on Nitro, March 19th. It was the week before the last Nitro. I can't think of a better example of why they were losing at that point. Letting Rick fucking Steiner stinking up the fucking show every time he's on, no selling, going slow motion. It was just fucking awful when the WWF just has such a hot product on the other channel. It's fucking Rick Steiner stinking it up. But I also fucking hated when Sable was women's champion in 1999. And I say that with quotes because she barely wrestled and it was evening gown matches and shit, and she lost the fucking title to Deborah, who wasn't even a real wrestler anyway, because Shawn Michaels reversed the decision. It was such a crock of shit. So I thought that was one of the worst. But now that that's out of the way, let's talk about some of the best. What were some of the best moments on the Monday Night War?
Mae Young gives birth to a hand.
Best?
Yeah, probably number one best, yeah. There was one time where The Undertaker threw Austin in the back of a hearse and he took him to Paul Bear's mortuary and he was about to embalm him alive with this giant embalming needle, but before he could do it, Kane broke in and just all hell broke loose and he saved Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was one of the best moments.
Can I get a real answer on
Yeah,
this side of the
seriously.
table?
When Austin kidnapped McMahon for the whole Raw, and just kept going back to clips of him in the back, like torturing him a little bit, put him with the fake gun, made him piss his pants. McMahon 316, so I just pissed my pants.
I thought that told a great story throughout the night in October '98, but I also think of when Mick Foley won the title. That was also a big moment in the Monday Night Wars because of what was going on the other channel too. But Mick Foley was one of those guys you never thought was going to win. I have already mentioned it before, January '99, but that was a really great feel-good moment.
The Sting promo after Fall Brawl. I thought it was...
What year?
96? 96, yes.
Yeah.
It was unique. Where's Sting going? I was interested. I wanted to watch. He just had been turned on by WCW. He came back to save them. He's not talking. He gets nobody anymore. That promo itself was, I think, very compelling and very cool. He turned on WCW because they don't want them in NWO and turn on you too.
There were lots of ship jumps like X-Pac and Luger, but I think of May 27th, 1996, when Scott Hall returned to WCW. You want a war? Well, wrestling's never going to be the same after that. So what were some of your favorite matches during the Monday Night War? There's tons.
When Cactus Jack debuted at Madison Square Garden to face Triple H in a hardcore match, when it's supposed to be like Mankind, and it's like, nah, I'm not hardcore enough to do this. Guys, send Cactus Jack down there. Comes down, the whole crowd screaming ECW, wins with a pile driver on a table on top of the ramp. Loved it. It was like January 97, I think.
It was September 22nd, 97.
Owen Hart versus British Bulldog in the European title tournament.
Nice.
That is still one of my favorite matches of all time.
Terry Funk versus Cactus Jack on Monday Night Raw.
It was Mick Foley when he was in between personalities. That was a really good hardcore match in the
It
summer
had a lot of
98.
emotion because Mick Foley was about to get fired. This was the match that was supposed to save his career, and he was fighting his best friend, and he knew he had to kick the shit out of Terry Funk to win it. It was emotional, yeah.
I mentioned the Owen tribute match from October '99 before on Nitro with Bret Hart and He Who We Do Not Speak Of, but he's also in mind for Raw because in February of 2000, February 7th, it was that big 10-man tag. It was Too Cool, Cactus, and Rock against DX, X-Pac, and Triple H, WWF champion, and the Radicals. And that was such a great, fun match. Kane also returned at the end of that. But that's also going to segue into our last little bit here on the Monday Night War, best overall show.
February 1997, the ECW invasion at the Manhattan Center. And that was the same night Legion Doom came back to WWE. It was...
They beat the shit out of the headbangers.
Oh my god, like between Tazz suplexing Michael Whipwreck on his head, Sabu jumping off the arm, Dudley's Dreamer and Sandman, just amazing all around.
The Raw in '98, where there's that face-to-face confrontation between Stone Cold Steve Austin and Mike Tyson. probably best overall show. Also really high ratings.
A lot of people would bring up the post WrestleMania 14 Raw that really set the standard with X-Pac returning, Outlaws winning the belts, and they really moved forward with their new audience that they got. That was a big moment for them.
The promo from Triple H, and then at the end, the reformation or the new DX after that cage match. Beginning and ending with DX, and the cage match is awesome. It was crazy, violent, and everything.
You see that big ass bruise on back of Terry Funk's back.
Yeah.
How do you even walk with that?
If I could pick one Nitro to show why Nitro was #1 for a while, it would be June 30th, 1997. If you look at it on paper, you just think, wow, this was great. Chris Jericho beat Juventud, Eddie Guerrero beat Dean Malenko. Okay, great undercard stuff. This is also when Nash beat the shit out of Mysterio, just threw him around. This is before Mysterio got his big win a couple years later. But the main event was a 6-man tag of Luger, the Giant, and DDP versus the Outsiders and Macho Man Randy Savage. It went to a no contest, as per usual on Nitro, I suppose. But the ending here, this is one of those moments where you're like, holy shit, standing up, what's going to happen? Because Raven was in the crowd the whole time. He came back to WCW. He was Scotty Flamingo years before, of course, but this is after being ECW champion, Raven. He jumps the rail just as Curt Hennig is walking down the aisle. Like, what the hell is going on here? So many people. That was just amazing to see, and what a cliffhanger. Didn't follow up on it, but oh well, that's WCW for you.
The Nitro where Goldberg beat Hogan.
Georgia Dome.
Yeah, and that was a change of channel kind of night. Like, I'm a big WF fan. I only watch WCW during commercials, but that was one of those I gotta watch. I gotta see Goldberg win the title.
Well,
huge.
that was the top babyface of the company winning the title, and that's a cliche I do like. But we're going to move on to wrestling cliches next. But first, a message from Jenny Rose.